Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of Dream Chasers Ground Zero. Today I have with me Nic DeAngelo. Nic, why don't you just kind of give us a little bit of an intro about yourself and just kind of tell us what Ground Zero was like for you and sort of some of the things that you've learned along the way to help you get to where you are today.
Sure. What's up, Aaron? What's up, everybody? I hope everyone's having a good day. Yeah, my name is Nic DeAngelo. I'm with Saint Investment Group. So we are a real estate investment company. We do all distressed assets. So we buy distressed properties, we buy distressed debt, and we've been doing that for a handful of years. But yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. It was actually a very interesting process to kind of look back. And I'm usually, forward facing. I'm usually kind of ignoring the rear view mirror, just kind of going as fast as I can in the direction I want to go. But yeah, I thought it was a very interesting concept doing a ground zero, kind of starting at, what was the starting point? And so, yeah, my starting point in entrepreneurship and business and really kind of taking it off to the next level. Kind of my soft start was I come from a big Italian immigrant family. So I actually started working at 12. I started construction. And so I kind of got an early intro to the business world, but it was very good to get that start and kind of get an idea of the business world from an early age and kind of getting those instincts ingrained and getting the hard work. And those were the two things I got from really kind of starting work early. But more importantly to your question is the kind of, I guess, like the fed up moment where everything changed, where I just said, hey, I'm all in. I'm 100% committed. The boats are burned. There is no going back. Was a moment actually in college, and I was about, let's say, 21, and I was at that time I was in the music industry. I was paying my bills as a full-time DJ and going to class during the day, and that's kind of that was kind of how I was making ends meet. But I've been reading a lot of books. I've always been an aggressively avid reader, always reading 2-3 books at a time and spending a lot of time on that. And I forgot which book, but it talked about projecting out your life and seeing where it's going and kind of imagining your life like a chart, like a graph, right? And saying where you're at today, what actions are you taking, what your what your hobbies are, what your habits are, and where does that lead you, and where are your goals? And if there's a huge difference between those two, then you got a freaking problem and you need to figure out how to recorrect your course. So I kind of woke up one morning and looked around, and I had very, very interesting friends, artists, DJs, people that, some people that you might have, seen in different media and things like that. They were, I was in a really interesting part of LA. There were celebrities around, and I just kind of woke up and it was super unfulfilling for me. So I had friends that were doing a lot of drugs, people that were partying 5-6 nights a week. And I just woke up and said, I am not trending. The projection of my life is not going where I wanted it to go. And, all respect to the people that were around me, but they just weren't my people, right? They didn't have the dreams that I wanted. Many of them were trust fund style kids that had their whole lives pre-planned and pre-organized and financially secure without the hustle and without the effort. And I just knew that that was not going to be my future. So I just needed to stop kind of surrounding myself with people that weren't at the same frequency. So I literally woke up one morning and just said, my health is not there. I've been working late nights. I've been, in a scene that wasn't super conducive to great health. My wealth certainly wasn't there. I had, probably more money than any of my friends, maybe let's say $5,000 in the bank. As a college kid, that was kind of cool, 5-10 grand. A few things, small things going on, but nothing major. And then my happiness was not there at all. My personal growth was not there. So I woke up, I took my phone and I threw it in the pool. And I just said, that's it. That's it. New number, new phone, new friends, new life. And really, I had been reading a ton of investment books for years. My goal was always to get to real estate eventually and to be a full-time investor. And so I just started it that day. I was probably 21. I had plenty of fun in my lifetime being in the music industry and that lifestyle. And that was kind of the turning point, was wipe the slate clean, completely clean out my crowd, change my number, and wake up kind of on a new path and on a new hustle and make sure I was getting where I wanted to go.
That's awesome, man. I think a lot of us really need that kind of clean slate outlook. That's what I know. A lot of people struggle when they try to kind of rewrite their direction, that they still have those attachments to their old life kind of dragging behind them. Think of them kind of like chains. How you have to that you just carry that extra weight all the time, and it makes that whole transition so much more difficult. So I like the whole throwing the phone in the pool. I love that make a statement, kind of thing. So directly after that, what's the first step you took to set yourself on that new path?
Yeah, I think I think burning the boats and all that's great, and throwing your phone in a pool is a big statement for like going the correct direction. But it's really about setting up the next steps and where does that actually go, right? And so for me, it was get everything, kind of get basic ducks in a row and read books at a massive degree and follow the best sources of information that I could literally just shove into my brain and get my brain at the right frequency. I knew I wasn't there. I knew where I wanted to go. And at the time it was I don't know, 2009, 2010. So it was the Great Recession. So there weren't jobs where you could just apply. I'm sure people were getting jobs. I want to keep a little bit more of an abundance mentality, but for what I wanted to do, I had no network. I had no money for any significant amount to invest in real estate. So I had to figure out a way to get there. And so I immediately started something that's long gone, but it was a mailing list of real estate investment clubs in my area. And I just started a mailing list. I'd go to every RIA event. I'd shake hands with everybody. I'd say, if you want to find out about more events, go join my mailing list. And I just tried to compile people that were interested in real estate just to build my network. And that was kind of like I have no money. I have no real, experience in doing any of this, but I want to get involved as much as I can. So I did that. And then I eventually used that list to barter my way into a free job in real estate. So back then, when it was such a bad market, you had to negotiate for a free job, right? To work for free. So I just said, look, I got a list with 500,000 people. You're a real estate investor, super low, like a low level guy, but was just the nicest guy in the world. And I knew would be hands-on and kind of show me the ropes. And so I kind of negotiated into there and just to try to get that free job, man, just to learn as much as I could on real estate at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I can personally vouch for the whole free job thing. That's how I kind of got started too. That's where it was last fall. We had an event at school, and there was like a real estate. It was like a big symposium where we had a bunch of different kind of industries. A bunch of alumni would come back to the school and kind of give presentations on what they do and things like that. So I just randomly joined a real estate room, and Adam Carswell, happened to be in that room.
Great guy.
And he's an alumni here, and I know he played basketball here, which I also did. So I was also kind of able to leverage that, that thing we had in common to then follow up with him and say like, hey, I'm recently interested in this. Like, can we follow up? Can we set up a meeting? Like, I'm interested in learning more. And he was like, absolutely. And then after that, like we had our first meeting. I just kind of talked it out with him. And I mean, and Adam, like, so obviously from there, he just took it and ran with it. And,
Awesome.
he turned our conversation into a LinkedIn interview, posted it out on LinkedIn. And, I had people reaching out to me, offering, help and whatever, just because of his sheer network. And then obviously that then turned into an internship, and now we're doing this, you know what I mean? So like,
Amazing.
I guess what I'm trying to say is don't look at a free job as a bad thing, because, it might start that way, but all in all, it could eventually lead to great rewards for everyone. So
I can't agree more. I figured, there's two paths, right? You work to learn, or you work to earn, right? And on my side, I said, hey, I'm not in a rush to be the guy that's making the most. I want to be the guy that's in the right position to learn and to grow the most and get closest. So I looked at it like it was the best deal that I ever got. I looked at it like I was lucky, right? Mm-hmm. Just to be near a real estate investor who's transacting during a really down time, looking at deals. I learned deal analysis. I learned major stuff. And, I eventually learned the skill of running two businesses at once, because I had to start this little side hustle just to pay my bills to, exist during that period of time. So, man, if you have a goal and you have a, passion of something you want to get towards, then for me, I'd negotiate my butt into the room, with free hustle any day of the week. I do it 100 times out of 100, man, no question.
Yeah, that's where I also think there's a lot to be said about kind of offering, well, not offering, but asking how you can give value before asking for value. That's where like you sort of bring your free hustle to someone who could use your help, and then in turn they give you value back just in the knowledge, and then you kind of embrace the whole process. And obviously that, you know, that was the beginning of the snowball. So
Absolutely.
yeah, and just kind of looking back on that, did you kind of have any fears or doubts or kind of beliefs that you were struggling with during that time that, you know, were kind of attempting to hold you back as you were trying to kind of propel yourself into this new life?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it was probably, in one way, it was one of the best periods of my entire life, and in many ways, it was the worst by far period of my life, because the economy was doing bad. People just didn't have the money or the positive outlook, especially not in real estate. I had just kind of had a rough breakup of a relationship, and I literally stopped talking to every single friend I ever had. Right, so it was a very lonely and kind of difficult time, but it was kind of like me putting myself through the fire in a way of like I needed that personal growth. So in the mornings, I was up super early. I was reading books. I was exercising. I was meditating. I was getting my butt into the office. I was making like some days I'd be making 50 plus phone cold calls before my boss was even in the office, right? And then you work all day, and then you go work on your side hustle, and then you crawl into bed for 4 hours of sleep or whatever, and then you get up the next day. And it was just, that was the period. It was kind of the trial by fire, and in the most amazing way possible, because I grew as an individual. My knowledge grew, my trust in myself grew, my understanding of business, where you're pouring through books, you're kind of understanding of yeah, it was an amazing period that was really, really necessary, and something I'm super thankful for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely relate at least some to where that is now. I know my workload is definitely not that high, at least yet, but in a way I'm kind of excited to get to that point, because that's when you can kind of really start to feel that traction sort of starting to take hold, because you can almost feel your own growth, and that's like an exciting process. So I know, at least for myself, that, we're just working right now, we're just trying to get every little bit we can have. And I know definitely hearing about your process there, like that, like, because some people might sound gruesome, and they might say like, well, I don't want any part of that. I want I want and need my 8 hours. Like some people, obviously each person's different, but I guess kind of where I'm going with this is sort of, what did you kind of do to stay motivated in those times with something such, with a schedule like that? Like, you got to want it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so what was kind of going through your head during that time that you were able to use, to get yourself out of bed every day with low sleep, and then just get back at it every single day?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. So I admittedly I consider myself the biggest sleep diva of all time, truthfully. I'm not the person that's like can pull, over, all-nighters and always. It was just a period of time that I was okay with running a little bit on empty with gas in the tank, because I had my goal. I wanted to get to a certain place in real estate. I wanted to be able to invest at a certain level, and I wanted to be able to have a certain amount of money to invest at that level, and not just be kind of like a transaction broker in real estate. I wanted to be a guy at the table. I wanted to be a partner. I wanted to be doing the big deals, and I didn't know about raising money. I didn't know how to do that. So the only way I knew how to do it was just figure out how to earn the money myself, and build up a big enough nest egg and pay my bills. So a lot of it was just survival that kept me going. And then the goal was to have a seat at the table as soon as possible. So I was super fortunate and super lucky that there were, older mentors that just were like, oh my God, this kid's crazy. This kid just wants to, work himself to death, and just badger me with questions. And thank God they answered them all, and they didn't kick me out of their office. But yeah, the fuel that kept me going was, one, it really actually was survival. I mean, I was living at my parents' house making $0 after college. So there was a huge like, hey man, I got to kick my own butt to get this moving. And eventually I'd like to like live on my own and move out and do, you know, that kind of thing. And then the flip side was I wanted a seat at the table, and I wanted enough money to invest with these, you know, guys that were several generations or a generation at least older than me. And I saw it. So I had kind of the cheat code of seeing with these guys at that level. And I'm like, that is possible. That could be me. There's just this huge chunk of money between that. So I was trying to bridge that gap as soon as possible. So me doing low sleep and doubling, you know, shifts and stuff was just a no-brainer for how I was mentally computing that at that time.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly kind of similar to something I'm dealing with right now. I know that like I kind of feel like I run on what you call like run on empty, you know, fairly often.
Sure.
But I know for me, like I just don't sleep well. I don't really know kind of what, you know, what factors play into that, but I don't really sleep well. Like I will try to go to bed early. I have tried different medications. I've tried all this stuff, but I swear I cannot get more than like 4 to 6 hours every night. So like my biggest thing lately is I feel like I've still been trying to kind of get my schedule in order, because like I still have classes and things that like I have to, you know, swing around and do stuff. But like if I'm gonna be up and awake in bed, pretty much just angry about the fact that I can't fall asleep, I might as well be spending that time doing something more productive and then just go to bed a couple hours later. So like, so that's one of the things I've been dealing with. I just, you know, like, and which I'm probably going to start doing is I'm just going to be laying there awake for a couple extra hours. I might as well have my nose in a book or something and be, you know, making something out of it.
Absolutely. That's awesome, man. Yeah. That the reading before bed, one, it turned my brain off because my brain was going a million miles an hour. I had a lot of anxiety at that stage of these crazy things going on. But that having that last X amount of minutes, 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever it is, hour before bed, just with pure amazing information and pure growth and pure perspective into your brain, and then having that just digest all night in your brain, game changer, man. Great game changer. I'm telling you, I love it.
Yeah, I feel like for me personally, that it's almost like the opposite. I feel like if I take that time and kind of invest my time into like a book or something that gives me all of that like perspective, I feel like I get energized from that. I feel like that's what turns my brain on. So then like I'll be sitting there laying in bed trying to turn it off, but now I have the gears turning about whatever I just read, and it's like
that makes sense.
So then I can't kind of like turn it down. So then it's like, sometimes it depends kind of what, I'm reading or what exactly I'm doing. But I know for me that sometimes like it's definitely a motivator, which is great, but at the same time, like I need my sleep. So it's like kind of counterintuitive, at least at that time. So I have to work on my schedule a little bit in that sense. But
that makes sense.
So
yeah.
So just going back to your story, sort of what do you feel is something that you did that has led to your success thus far that, is something that like people looking at you from the outside wouldn't see, or something that say you haven't told people? If somebody asks you like, what's your biggest key, like there's always an obvious one, but at the same time, like what's the underlying factor that people don't see that has brought you your success thus far?
Oh man, that's a great question. That's a great question. I mean, my initial reaction would be having an obsession with books, just because when you have that high level and that high digestion, like the regular feeding of amazing information, you can't help but wake up. I mean, even you look at a podcast like this, amazing guests, amazing information, amazing discussions, those things just, if you just flood your mind with that, I think that's kind of the little things behind the scenes that put you, above and beyond. But I would say the things that have paid off the most along with that people wouldn't see, and they would just see kind of a certain level or a certain thing today and not see the decisions or the big moments along the way that were behind closed doors. I would say that I've managed risk in an interesting way where we've taken some really big moves, right? Like anytime you sit down, I was crapping my pants the first time I put my business plan together in front of investors, and they're looking at me and let's see, we started a company and entered the cannabis space for, let's say, 5-6 years. And man, I was terrified at those early meetings. And it's very successful Fortune 500 CEOs of big financial institutions, CEOs of big companies. And I'm putting this business plan in front of them. And they're like, you want to do what? Are you insane? What are you, nuts? And I'm like, it's legal, these states are doing this. And so I think that I made big moves because eventually I didn't have $5 million to get to the table and co-invest with guys. So I was like, okay, what else can I do? And basically I was making money was kind of my answer to my own question. So I stepped up in a big way on some businesses that really panned out well. Cannabis was big. We were very early. We were one of the first licenses in the state of California. Did a number of licenses in a couple other states. And so there were some really interesting big plays that I just kind of jumped ahead in line and could have probably waited a little bit longer, but just said, hey man, I'm going to do it now, right? I'm going to move this ahead. So that was on one side. So we went real risky on one side, pushed ahead into an industry that nobody had any idea and that was just barely starting to form, and kind of having the guts to step up with serious not institutional level, but ultra high net worth individuals and have those tough discussions of how this would all work and make them a lot of money so that they're very interested later. And then on the flip side, take money off the table of success, put it towards more stabilized kind of core assets, if you will, some equities and some things like that are just really boring assets that are not fun or sexy to talk about, but are cornerstone if you're really trying to build wealth over a long period of time. So I tried to manage risk. Like, you jump way ahead, you take these huge moves, you take these huge steps, and then also put money aggressively aside where you have that balancing of, like, if you fall flat on your face, you have the conservative stuff, but you also have the upside of the big steps that you're taking. So those were big. And then my transition to real estate, kind of bringing in, saying, there's a couple timing points and some zoning changes for some projects that I was kind of seeing around the corner, saw some big zoning changes come up, and being able to raise that money was like, oh my gosh, I still love those investors to death to this day. We were able to make money together, which is always a great relationship builder, because making those guys a lot of money. And so those were the behind the scenes discussions. Those were the behind the scenes kind of strategies that, weren't super sexy to take money off the table and set it aside. But years later, it's some of the best things I've ever done is to diversify a little bit and get a little more strategic with investing.
Yeah, man, that's great. That's great. I got to take a second for myself to kind of.
Yeah, I know it's a lot. I'm not trying to talk on you. I'm trying to think, I got all these things that I've experienced. I just trying to put them together, organized for you to kind of answer these questions. So yeah, I appreciate it, man. It's
yeah, no,
great.
You're doing great.
Think about them.
That's what I guess one of the things that I thought of is kind of changing pace on you a little bit, is that we've talked about some of the things that have led to your successes, but what are some things that you learned from your failures, or from some of those roadblocks that you hit, where you really had to stop and think on your feet, change things up?
Yeah, I think that's awesome, man. I love that freaking question. So I categorize my failures into two categories. The first being like big lumps, and then the second being like little lumps, right? Mm-hmm. And I think if you're an entrepreneur, or you're in a startup phase, or you're in a smaller business, or you're wearing a lot of hats, any business, you're going to be taking a lot of little lumps every day. And so it's like, you hear people be like, how do I not blah, 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 blah. And then usually the answer is like, wait, are you saying how do you not get rejected every single day on, when you push forward on this, or you have a failure on that? Like, that's part of business, right? Those little lumps are, you learn each time from the little ones. The big ones, it's like, try not to get, knocked out from the haymaker of failure. You know what I mean? And so the little ones, I'd say, it's keeping perspective and just kind of like daily knowing what your big goals are. Cause there's sometimes you don't need to take 20 minutes to think through, or an hour or a day to think through just a little lump here and there, or how somebody was a jerk to you on the phone, or how you tried to get this thing done and that didn't happen, or, you know, whatever. But the big ones, I think, here are the biggest takeaways that I've gotten from kind of like big failures and biggest falling on my face moments. Early businesses, I probably put a half a dozen business plans together. I thought through every single piece of it. I, you know, really pushed forward. I thought it was the, you know, it was the deal and it was going to be successful. And I was rejected flat out probably half a dozen times on different businesses. So I was like, dang, that sucks, you know? And so I was a younger guy at the time, and it just kind of was like, keep on moving was my, you know, it was like, maybe I could have done this better. Maybe I could have been more organized. I need to figure out these numbers better. And you just kind of listen to the feedback. Usually if people are, you know, the people you're talking to will tell you. And then I made the mistake of asking for money. Okay. So if at the, you know, especially in real estate or in a lot of like, you know, fundraising environments, there's a joke where if you want money, ask for advice. And if you want advice, ask for money. Okay. And so I always asked for money, and I got all this freaking advice and no money. And I was like, I should have, you know, went in more with the mindset of that I'm learning. I thought I had to have all the answers, and then I had to just know every single thing about every single thing in every single meeting. And that wasn't always the case. There was times where I could have gone to some of the people in my network and just been like, hey, I know this, I feel this will work. What am I missing? Blah, 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 blah. And they get a little more interested in being along for the ride than just like stroking a check or not. So that's one, is kind of dealing with investor side. And then I think there's slow burn failures that don't happen by like, you know, one day you just wake up and, oh my God, you know, I failed. It's failures of letting things slide, letting, you know, culture slide in a business over a period of time. You know, when we built up one in business, it hit about, let's say over 40 employees. So it was a very busy operation. It was very busy business. And there's little things you'd see, like hiring wasn't up to speed. So then the entire team kind of tanks down its culture. And it's just kind of like a slacker culture instead of a hustle culture. Things like holding on to a business for too long, right? And you just know that the market conditions are going away that are not favorable, not cutting ties early enough with key employees or key situations. So those are kind of the big takeaways. Or timing is everything. Understanding markets, understanding individuals, where they're at in life in your organization, their interests, understanding investors, understanding what not to do is kind of like some of the biggest takeaways. You know, things like, the asking for advice instead of money, and or vice versa. You know, and also the other is not getting coaching soon enough. So I invest a lot. I've always invested a lot into education. I thought books were education, coming from a college kind of background. The reality is I probably spend $20,000 to $30,000 a year now on coaching and different kind of classes and things like that. And I wish I actually would have done that sooner and pushed more chips in, because having somebody that you can call and have super detailed, difficult questions answered, there's not books on a lot. Like, you hit certain levels of things. There's no books on, you know, how to cross manage funds with distressed assets in two different asset classes. Like, it's difficult, man, you know? So just having mentorship, I'm willing to pay for it, especially if it's good. So I don't know. I know that's kind of bouncing around, but those are kind of my biggest takeaways, like what failures and what, you know, I did to rectify those.
I'm in that processing thing again.
Yeah.
I mean, coming from someone that personally, I do feel like I have a decent amount of like business ideas. What is something that you changed from those, you know, those few that you were getting rejected? What did you kind of change to then turn those into, you know, advantages, and then, you know, obviously, you know, making them successful plans?
Yeah, I'd like to tell you, like, here's the 5-step thing, and, you know, be super sophisticated. And but to honest to God, I was too young and I didn't have any gray hairs. So nobody wanted to give me a lot of money. That's just straight up. And so what did I do? I built businesses that were able to grow organically, that could have incremental investment, instead of, hey, I need $10 million. Because because they're like, whoa, partner, like we're not cutting you a $10 million check, but if you need 100 grand to get started and then 100 grand in 3 months at a certain state, step up, and then $1 million later, and then $3 million for this project, and then $8 million for, that's kind of how it was in my progression. It was like, I kept trying to come to the table with huge dollar figure asks, and guys were just like, dude, you're not worth $10 million. Straight up. Like, you don't have the track record. We don't, your idea is very interesting, but it's not tech where it warrants like you guy could walk and be like, okay, so like, here's my one sentence pitch, and here's, $100 million check. It wasn't any of that. So I didn't have those. So basically I just asked for less money and built a business around expecting less money out of the gates and building like a real scrappy, real style bootstrapping operation. And what was interesting was by the time I was ready for those next tranches of investment, I was like, dude, my business is doing good enough. I don't want your money. I don't want more partners, actually. So we kind of went a different direction with it, but it was asked for less because it's much easier to give them a game plan of, hey, if I hit these hurdles, give me more money. Because they're like, oh, okay, now you're invested along the way. Also, skin in the game, right? And when you're younger, it's really hard to like, you're like, I'll put in, a few $1,000 or whatever. It's hard to even come up with that at multiple phases of my own development. But skin in the game, if you can figure it out, that's big for investors. And then the other side is lowering your dollar figure investment if it's an entrepreneurship style venture. That's for sure, in my experience.
Love it. I mean, that personally resonates a lot with the ideas that I have, because, being someone that's young and doesn't have any skin in the game and wants to start a business, it's where do you find credibility? So like, I like the whole idea of incremental, like, because you're showing at each step that you've then made the progress to warrant a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and then all of a sudden they're asking you, and and you're like, no, I don't need it anymore. So
Absolutely.
and how did it feel to then be in that position where you could then tell them I don't need it?
Well, I basically showed up and paid off all my debts in a day. So I just was like, here's your check. Here's your check. Here's your check. And then, you wake up the next day and it's like, these are people that you've built relationships with, that you've worked with, that you've made money with. So it wasn't like people want to talk like FU money, right? It was all love money for me. It was like hugs and high fives. And there were people that were very much invested in, like, we had a relationship where they wanted me to succeed. They had enough freaking money, dude. They weren't like sitting there trying to make their squeeze out. I mean, obviously they like every guy who has, or guy or girl that has a lot of money wants to make more, but it's at the flip side, there's a level where the relationships that you build along the way are people that you prefer their success over you making a few more bucks. And so I was very fortunate that those people were in my life. But the feeling of it is, it's just light, it's like, you just feel light. You feel like you can actually make your own decisions. You don't got people over your shoulder that are kind of like, hey, by the way, no, this is what you're going to do instead. And so being, anybody who has investors is beholden, to be a good fiduciary of those investors. And when you don't have those, and you can just kind of be off the rails a little bit and run your business a little more streamlined how you want it, it feels good. It feels good to really take off, as long as you know that you can. Sometimes it's good to have, a little board of advisors to still be able to call up if they have a financial interest too. So that's a balancing interest.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm sure we could go back and forth about this for forever, but I do think I need to close it up a little bit. Let's say one last question.
Sure.
Is just sort of, how did you go about finding those right investors that were kind of a little more geared towards your success, say, than getting $1? And like, obviously you want to be able to pay them back for that, but you need the people that are going to buy into your idea too. You need people that understand what you're trying to accomplish and that are willing to invest in you more than the business, because the ones that are more willing to invest in you, I mean, those are going to be the ones that help you more. Like, it's just kind of, it's really that simple. But I mean, like, coming from me, who might be potentially doing that someday, knowing something like that could potentially be huge. So
yeah, I would say early on, it's connecting with your network, and it's explaining what you're doing, how you're doing it, and just kind of like planting the seeds with people, right? Many friends and family were the early investments, right? And we're transitioning our entire business to be more of a fundraising machine on the real estate and debt side. And so to give you an honest to God answer of like a fully scalable fundraising business, I don't have an answer. But early on, what really, really worked was being super organized on your materials, being super organized on your numbers, expressing what you're doing with people, asking for feedback on what you're doing for people that may be viable investors, showing them that, hey, this is the path to success, having a very clear, line of sight and clear, like step by step on it, where it's not just this like, boom, here's a whole bunch of information. What do you think? Right? It's more like, this is phase one. This is our entry strategy. These are our 4 exit options that we can, do. These are our decision-making variables for each step. This is our, we know our KPIs, our key performance indicators at each stage of this. These are our, KPIs that we're shooting for and projected, et cetera, et cetera. When you land on those and someone's like, oh, okay, I feel this. I can feel and see and watch the machine of this business work in my mind, then, and they're really bought in at that point, you have somebody who's a potential investor for sure. I think it was actually, shoot, man, it wasn't, I don't know if it was Adam, but kind of in a group I'm with Adam, it was something along the lines of a confused investor is no investor. I think was like a quote like that. And so it's that clarity and that organization that really can kind of land it. As far as sourcing investors, there's a million ways. You can go on, PitchBook, which is a massive database of investors that, work with large funds. You can do, there's Y Combinator, a million different incubators if you have more of like a tech-based or kind of e-com style business. But friends and family was my route. And that was the easiest kind of network that I was like, that I could really tap into at that phase.
That's awesome, man. I mean, this has been a value-packed episode for sure. I honestly hate to say it, but we do need to wind it down here. I'm sure you have other things you need to do today.
Yeah.
So, do you just have any closing remarks that you'd like to share? Based on your success or just, anything in general.
Yeah, I think what you guys are doing is awesome, man. Aaron, this is ground zero. I think is not talked about enough. When someone wants to really launch themselves, into the next level. And I think it's a lot of building, it's a lot of hustle. But I would say that if anyone else can do it, that you can do it, and any of your listeners or anyone else can do it. So it's just about hustle, game plan, and execution, man. So yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. I can't thank you enough for coming on and, just sharing your experience. It's been honestly really great to hear. And, it's been motivational, and that you've planted so many seeds, that I don't know. I definitely think this is going to be one that even myself needs to listen to more than once, because there's a lot to go back through and take from it. So, just thank you for sharing your expertise. And, it's honestly just been really great. So thanks again.
Absolutely, man. And if anyone wants to get in touch, saintinvestment.com, and that's our website. And if you reach out or hit the contact or anything, you can get in touch with me and we can connect.
Awesome. Thanks again for sharing that information. And with that, everyone, remember, this is ground zero, and there's nowhere to go from here but up.
Cheers.